Jeanie, let's have you go first. And if you could just share with everybody where you're from, what, where you started in your life from, uh, even from what you did as a degree in school, and then just kind of give us the path that you took and where you have ended up today so that everybody on the call could just get to know you a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me, Brandy, and great to be here. I've attended these on the other side as an attendee, and it's always been very interesting. So my name is Jeanie Anirudhan. I am currently at PepsiCo as a chief of staff to one of the senior directors in cybersecurity. It's an interesting journey that I've had, lots of pivots, lots of different things that I've done. I grew up in India. I went to school and college, and I was very interested at the time when I started looking at electives and optional, things to take, even in high school. I was very interested in some of the liberal arts, social sciences, more the social sciences. Not very creative, unfortunately, but very interested in political science and sociology and economics and things of that nature. And so I gravitated towards that, in my bachelor's degree in India. In India, you generally take, three majors or three subjects in your degree, and mine was economics, political science, and sociology. So, and of the three, economics interested me the most, and that was probably because of my analytical, which is in my top 10. At the time, it was probably a little higher in the top 10 than it is today. After which, I kind of, did a master's in economics and eventually decided I wanted to do my PhD. So that's where the learner was really coming into full force of my top three strengths. And that's when I moved to the United States to do my graduate degree at the time. And decided I wanted to do my my PhD in economics. I enrolled at the University of Maryland, and then 2 years into it, I decided I didn't want to do a PhD. I said, so it was very obvious at that point to me that I enjoyed learning, but I needed to see something from the learning that I thought I could invest myself in. I did not think I wanted to teach. That was not for me. I did not want to do research. I was too much of a people person. So I decided, I just said, you know what? I don't think this is for me. So I graduated with a master's and I decided to find a job, wanted to go out. And obviously, I was a poor student at the time. So I really wanted to get a good income. So I said, I really need to go out there and get a decent monthly pay, which had a few zeros on it. So went out there, but then things started happening in my personal life. I met my husband, we got married, and then I moved to Texas. And Texas in the 90s, early 90s, I date myself here. There were a lot of opportunities for somebody who wanted to do something with economics. There was not. However, I did find a role in a college textbook publishing company that had moved to Fort Worth at the time. There are lots of mergers and acquisitions in that industry. And so there was a merger. They acquired a company in the West Coast, they acquired a company in the East Coast, and they acquired a company from Chicago. And so they decided, oh, Fort Worth, Texas, will be right in the middle. So they came and they headquartered themselves right here in Fort Worth, Texas. And I just happened to find, and they were college textbooks. So they were looking for somebody who could do some sort of more like a product development editing. They called it developmental editor, which was more of a, product development, but developing a textbook. And so they said, we're looking for this. And I just applied for the job. And they're like, oh, you have a degree in economics. This is wonderful. Please come on board. We have, there's a line of textbooks that we're developing in economics, and we have some very major authors that we're working with. So we would really like, somebody who has experience, who has the background. So I joined that company. And then, I worked there for 3 years. It didn't pay great, but it was a good first job. But I did realize rapidly after the first couple of years that they really didn't want me to bring any of my economics knowledge in. They just wanted me to kind of, help the authors who were already PhDs from MIT and Harvard and Yale to just kind of, help them write better. And I'm like, well, I could do that, but that's really not my calling. So then I started looking around again, and in '96 joined Texas Instruments. Very interesting that was. They wanted to start, so they have the calculator group. Many of you have probably used a TI calculator. I'm sure everybody has in the course of their high school or college career. So calculator group said, we want to develop some collateral material with our calculators. So since you have the experience, of publishing and things like that, why don't you come on board and help us develop this catalog of books, of supporting materials, if you will. So I joined TI, and I was part of their calculator group almost for 8 years. Helped them with that, with the setting up of that kind of line called explorations. It was a lot of fun, but I wanted to do more. I wanted to get more involved with the actual business of the group, and I wanted to be more visible. I wanted to be able to, kind of apply, some of my development, to grow some of my product development knowledge. And so I started working on software, and that was my first experience in anything technical, software, technology, calculator software for geometry was one of my first applications that I worked on as a developer. And I had to go and read textbooks in geometry, and I had to learn geometry again, from high school. And it was a lot of, just relearning everything, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was wonderful. And I really, it was a good kind of stepping stone, for me in TI, when I put my, when I got in, good foot in the door. But TI was starting to ramp down on that business. They were not interested. It was a cash cow. They were not interested in investing too much more. And I was starting to get a little nervous about kind of the direction that they were taking. So I decided to start, looking outside. I said, I probably need to find another job because they're not investing. This is not their core business. So 8 years into it, I started looking around, but somebody told me, why are you looking around? He has a big company. You should try to find something here. So I went ahead and I looked at IT. That was the first thing I knew about IT. I'm like, I'm not an IT person. I don't know anything about IT. We're like, no, you have skills. And I went and talked to the leader of their web development team. And she had just taken over, and she wanted some people who had a broader experience than just being a techie who wrote software. And she said, I would like you to come and be a business analyst. So I became a business analyst. And then I started looking at project management, and really got into project management in 2006, 2007, and spent the next 15 to 16 years doing that. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I really enjoyed pulling pieces together. I enjoyed looking at the big picture. I enjoyed driving towards results and making things happen. I enjoyed working with a team, working with individuals who had different strengths, different skills, bringing that all together. And so I did that for many years, until 2 years ago when, I decided I wanted to do something totally different. So I left TI, and I found this current role at PepsiCo. And here I'm doing some program management, but most of it is a really, truly chief of staff role. And I'm really enjoying, again, driving results, driving, for the team, doing work, being kind of the right hand to a senior director, that kind of thing. So that's kind of my journey.
And if I remember correctly, I bring this up because learners tend to engage in sort of like adult learning activities. So if I recall, you just got another certification. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, thank you for refreshing my memory. So all along the way, so I got an MBA when I was in the calculator division. I had an itch. I had two young children. I didn't know how I would do it, but I really, really wanted to do it. That had always been on my radar. So did an MBA. Then about 6 years later, I did my PMP. That's when I was really wanting to grow my skills in my area of responsibilities. So got my PMP, and then 2 months ago, I got my Certified Information Security Manager certification. So yes, I tend to kind of learn at intervals along with on-the-job learning.
Yeah, that's amazing. Does anybody have any questions for Jeanie about her path, about her story?
Well, it's too bad you don't make use of your free time. That's it.
Oh, I love to read. I love to, I mean, my learning never ends. It's just one of those things. I just enjoy that process. It's just the way it is.
No, and obviously I was being very sarcastic. It's
I
amazing
know.
what you have achieved by just being so persistent. So that's very admirable, I would say,
Thank
from
you.
listening to your story.
Thank you. I've enjoyed every step of the journey, I think.
I see about 4 of her qualities in her top 10 that are in my top 5.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
man, it's that belief thing and that significance thing, the individualization thing. It's a curse, I tell you. Just drives you to do more.
Yes.
Like you're capable of more, and to leave it on the table is a waste of life. It's a waste of breath, when you could be achieving more. It's just.
I do have a quick question, and I know we have more to go, but and we can dig into it maybe later. I have the same thing where I've learned a lot of different things, and then people ask me, how can you help? And you're like, man, okay, if I consider everything I've done, there are a lot of ways I can help. When you're looking at your new career, how do you pick and choose which of all the varied subject matter you have in your past you want to try to present as the option of where you could help them? How do you navigate that?
Jeanie, how have you navigated what you decided to do? Because I know you've had the same problems, right? You're like,
I've had the same problem.
I
love doing this, I'm doing that. But the way I look at it is, and every step I've made in my career has not been, planned, obviously. Very rarely has it been planned. I never knew I would be a program manager. I mean, that if you had asked me when I was 22 what I was going to be, and somebody said, you're going to be a program manager, I'd be like, what's that? No, I don't know what that is. I think, what I have always believed, and I tell this to my children, grown children as well, is, you have to take your strengths, what you do well, and you have to be able to say, I can help you with these things. I'm good at this. And that's why I continue to do it, because I'm in such a different role now. Even last week, I had my mid-year review with my manager, and I said, and my manager was like, what do you want to do next? And what else do you want to do? And I said, here, these are the areas I'm good at. These are the things I can help you with. So my restorative really comes into play at that time, because I'm like, I'm good at these things. And I deliberately had that conversation with him, focusing on those strengths that I know they are lacking, right? I've seen it. I've been in the department for 2 years. I can see the gaps. I can see where they struggle. They have very, very good technical people. They can figure out a cybersecurity breach and do whatever to close the gaps and make it happen. But when it comes to trying to organize something in a very proactive manner, they just can't do it. It's just not in their DNA. These people are so operationally focused. They're so reactive. If you have a crisis and you give them a fire that's burning, they will be all over it. They can jump all over it, fix it. But if it's something where you say, hey, we have to do something in 3 months, and we have to prepare for a tabletop exercise in 3 months for a bunch of executives in New York, which is where we're headquartered, or here, or somewhere in one of our other regions, they struggle. They have no clue, and they have no motivation to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I told him, I said, this is where I can help you, because this is what I'm very good at. And he was like, well, yeah, I think that's great. You can really help us. That's not his skill set either.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you kind of, and I always plug in where I think my skills can help, and where I see gaps. Now they may not be real, but that's where I try to kind of, promote that.
Thank you for that. That was awesome.
Oh, yeah, welcome.
So let's also introduce you to Darren, who I know some of you know since you worked at Sabre with Darren. Darren, if you could please give us your background of where you started in school and the career trajectory that you took and where you ended up, that would be awesome.
Yeah. I'm glad you're giving me leeway and not just a 30-second elevator pitch, because people with context sitting at the top,
I know.
I really struggle. I struggle when people say, just give me a quick snapshot. And then you need context, you need the history, you need everything that happened in my life to understand this little picture of Darren. So I'm glad you're giving me that leeway. And
Darren,
Jeannie's
I want to point
background was
something
awesome.
out. The context and the individualization, both of those together, it heightens what you just said, because the individualization is a storyteller and the context is, let me give you all the context. So I just wanted to point that out today, that those two paired together actually makes that, that 30-second pitch way harder.
Yeah, right. And with others, I want to hear their stories, right? So I love hearing the arc of their narrative, and I want to see how they got there. So so I'll go back to not the very, very beginning, but to my undergrad. So I was originally in education at Oklahoma State. So I grew up in Oklahoma, went to Oklahoma State and became a speech teacher and taught high school for 10 years. Loved it. So I was a high school teacher, not just speech, but I taught theater and drama, and then also computer applications. So really eclectic, technically savvy kind of stuff, as well as very liberal arts background. So love teaching. Thought I would teach for a long, long time, maybe get into administration. So after about 10 years, my wife, who was also a teacher, we were late having kids. And when she got pregnant, she was like, it was so hard. We had struggles having kids. She said, I want to stay home. And we thought, that's great. It's going to be really difficult in Oklahoma to live on one teacher's salary. We'll make a go of it. And around that time, I ran into a friend who worked at Sabre. And I was saying, my wife is pregnant. She'd like to stay home. It'd be nice to, work somewhere else. And he's like, oh, we're hiring at Sabre. And I knew Sabre because my dad owned a travel agency when I was in college. So I worked at the travel agency with my dad. So I knew Sabre. And before that, he worked with airlines. So I grew up non-revving, knew the industry. He actually retired with Delta. So went back from the travel agency world to airlines. So it was a whiplash career change. Kind of overnight, I went into the travel technology industry, and back to the teaching side. My kids were shocked. I have former students who still contact me today, kids who went to Juilliard, kids who were like not finalists, like top 10 on American Idol. I don't know if that's a finalist or not.
Wow.
But so I have that connection. There were, if people don't know me, it's the people who meet me then in my 20 plus years at Sabre, they would never guess. They're like, oh, you were a teacher, so math, right? You taught, maybe history, but never would they dream that I taught what I taught. So so I got into Sabre and thrived. Started out really just coding data, back in the days before there was automation with fairs and rules, and really enjoyed it. Quickly went back to school because I realized if I wanted to grow in my career, I needed business acumen. So I got an MBA and started leading people pretty soon after that. And air pricing operations is the team that I was in. I grew up in, I stayed in for many years at Sabre. Very complicated, crazy world of fairs and rules, pricing, all operations. So operations is where I was. And eventually I moved into end-to-end manager over the air pricing operations group. And that's where Brandy came into my team. And we did dashboards and consulting. It was a pretty wide open business ops kind of role, and loved having Brandy on that team. Of course, being extremely action oriented, and it was a great team. So we had some good times. And then I was promoted to director of air pricing operations. So I had the whole team, which is about 85, 90 spread across the globe, APAC, EMEA, Latin America, lots and lots of different places. Great team, and led that team for some years. And then moved, when COVID came along, moved into a more strategic biz ops role that just dealt with the care organization and delivery, because there was a reorg, and services and delivery overall. And then At the time, our executive vice president was wanting to start a preferred partner program. And because I had dealt with partners so much in air pricing operations, tasked me with standing up like a new third-party vendor program that was focused on delivery. So I stood that program up, and then we had a reorg, as many people know about who are familiar with Sabre, and I'm currently in transition right now. So that's way faster than I would like to tell the story. I give you lots of interesting insight on the side.
Proud of you.
Yeah, you know, the context, the learner side, I read incessantly, love historical biographies and history. It does for sure informs how I lead. As far as the individualization, again, we talked about it at the beginning. I like other people's stories. I like to hear how they tick, and that helps me. I think in my leadership style, it helps quite a bit. Where I thrive is getting teams to perform well. And Brandy, you introduced me to turn the ship around. It was turn the ship around, right?
Yes.
Very, very similar to my style, where I leave a org and it thrives without me. And it's a bit humbling because you're like, oh, you know, I kind of wish they would have struggled, but they do great. So when I leave my teams, they typically are high functioning and do great without me. And I think some of these strengths play into that.
Yeah, so I want to give you guys even more context on this, because when I came onto Darren's team, he is the one who actually helped encourage me to do the Gallup CliftonStrengths with the organization. And so I got to present the Gallup CliftonStrengths to his manager, and I got to work with his team on it first and foremost. It's literally this one of the starting points of where I started building this entire system that you guys see on the screen today. And I think that it's this individualization that Darren has, where he can see, you know, this is something that this person can do really well and can be, you know, exceptional at, and should spend some time and energy doing. And he's always been so supportive to everyone on his team to dive in and do some of the work that interests them as an individual. He also allowed me to help pilot a consulting business for the organization. It was hands down the most favorite thing I ever did in Sabre over the 7 years that I was there. It was so fun, not only because of what I was doing, which was piloting the consulting business. Number two, because Darren let me run. I'm a wild horse that just needs to run, and he just opened the gates and said run, and didn't hold me back. He was always there for me when I needed his support, but he wasn't in my way, right? He was like on the horse kind of next to me, trying to keep up and, you know, being supportive. And then thirdly, he paired me really well with another one of our team members. And that partnership was so strong. I mean, he just couldn't have done a better job of pairing me with somebody that was different than me, but that really complemented what I needed to help that program be successful. And so it was so fun introducing the strengths concept to him and his team, because we actually got to put words and communication to some of these things that were happening on the team. And I think for both of us, it was just a wonderful experience. So do you guys have any questions for Darren just out the gate based on his background and what he's done?
I always have questions, but I'm going to defer to somebody else first.
Okay.
Well, I just have a comment, and that is, you know, the background, Darren's and my background and where we started is kind of very similar. You know, I thought I wanted to be a teacher. He actually was a teacher.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I really, you know, and he did a great job of it. So maybe I would have too if I had stuck with it. That's the only comment I had.
Yeah, and I was thinking you both have like these similarities around, you know, you did technical writing and Darren does a lot of writing as well. You know, you guys both enjoy literature, and then you both enjoy that team aspect. And before this presentation that we were doing for you all today, I got a lot of questions from these two, right? They were like, we want the context. We want to understand what this is going to look like. What's the format going to be? It's so funny because other people don't even ask a thing. They'll just jump on and see what happens. But these guys were like, no, we really need to understand what this is going to look like so we can be successful at it. So I think that was the context strength coming through. So very interesting little parallels between the two of you. And Darren, do you like economics as well?
Love economics.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah. Jay, what was your question?
Well, I was noticing the commonality in their background in terms of the learning style. It's almost like if you're a learner, there's also a little bit of educator in you, right?
Well,
And I
I
think
want you to see, I want you to see something, Jay. He has input, learner, intellection, and context. So when you have
right.
that deep of a well of you want information and you want to learn how to do things and skills and you want to look at different perspectives and you want all the context, when you have that combination, that's where it becomes extremely strong academically. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could probably
I'm just
diagnose
saying,
me with
oh, go ahead.
Asperger's, right? With
What'd you say?
with 4 out of 5. You could probably diagnose me with Asperger's, I think. With the
I don't see
4 out of the
focus in there
5.
though.
It's true.
You add focus,
Maybe.
maybe.
Well, do you have extreme? I guess I'll ask that to both speakers. That's a curiosity thing you just popped in my brain. Do both of you have the ability to hyperfocus?
I can go first. I do, but I can hyper focus on something, but only for a limited amount of time.
Okay.
I need variety. I need variety in my life. I even noticed that when I was going to school. I mean, undergrad, even before that, I could not study more than one subject could only be for an hour. Then I had to take a break and then I had to move to another subject. Otherwise, my brain wouldn't function. I couldn't do it. I don't know if Darren, if you have this issue, but that's why I enjoy variety in whatever role I do, whether role and in personally, hobbies, whatever, right? I need to be constantly doing something different. If I have to do the same thing day in and day out, I die of boredom. And Brandy and I have talked about this. She's like, you can't do a job that requires you to do the same thing over and over again. There can be a small part of your job that can be that, but if I have to do the same, if I'm in finance, for example, finance people do a lot of things, every quarter, every period end, they work on the same things and they close and they do the same things. I could never do that job. I would just die of boredom. I'd quit. So to me, variety is very, very important. I don't know, Darren, I'll let you speak for yourself.
So I have hyperfocus when it comes to reading and learning, right? So depending on the topic, or if it's something I love, for sure, you would consider that probably hyper focus, that I would pick up a book and just not stop until I'm done, because I'm so caught up with the story and what's going on. So that probably fits with some of these top 5 strengths, I think. But for sure, I'm distracted in many ways as well.
But you also set a lot of perimeters for yourself. You guys, we're so lucky to have Darren right now, because when he is working, he is in the well, deep in the well, and it's difficult to get his time because he's very structured about his time. People come to him for his input a lot, so his calendar is really full. But Darren, you're so good. You always go walk over the lunch period and you listen to your podcast and you get your learning in for the day. But then at the end of the day, you go home and you spend time with your family. So it's like you have this, it's almost like you put in sort of a self-imposed structure. Is that accurate assessment?
Yeah, it is. I mean, my days are pretty structured, as you know, and for sure I put up a line between all of that and going home and spending time with my family.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So I don't know if it's, Jay, if you would call it hyper focus, but it's certainly a respective.
Well, I think it's funny. I said hyper focus, but I think it was learning.
Yeah.
But I like learning. I'm the same way. I can only learn for about an hour and then I have to take a break. It's like my brain starts to overload and overheat a little bit because I'm too in depth in it. But working, like I can sit down and work for like 8 to 10 hours straight and not stop. I mean, and I don't know. I was curious if you guys have the ability to do that. Like if you get engaged in your work and you know it needs to be done, you're like, the only time you're getting up is to go to the bathroom. Otherwise, you're getting work done. And I didn't know if that was something you guys had in your background, or you're just really good at saying, nope, I'm going to get this much work done and get up and go. So
yeah, and it sounds like also different people are going to be able to do that at certain times, and then at other times they're going to be easily distracted, it kind of depending on what it is. Like Darren said, when he's reading, he's probably hyper focused, but when he's doing something else, maybe not. So maybe it also kind of depends. So
I
mhm.
I don't see any orange in Darren's top 10.
Yeah, Darren, let's talk about
And
that.
yet it sounds like
Sad.
he was very effective at influencing people and teams to get them to do what needed to be done. So how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, Darren, how do you do that?
I don't know. Yeah, that's, yeah, lots of orange down at the bottom. So influencing happens, I guess, in a secondary manner, like you were saying. I think that because if you look in, there's a lot of relationship building. So through relationships, I do think I influence. For sure I've had very successful teams over the course of my career. So I've been able to steer people in the right direction, but just maybe not in that extroverted orange category.
So let me pose a question here. Jim, how do you define influence? What's your definition of influence?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say it's affecting other people, aligning other people to get something done.
Mm-hmm. So,
and I'm sensing that perhaps Darren is influencing by his hard work ethic of digging deep into the well, as you say, and leading by example, just by hard work
well,
that other people want to get involved with.
Yeah, so I'll give you my perspective, and then Darren, you can tag team off of that, okay? So what I saw with Darren is that he treated everybody differently, number one. So the way he worked with one person was very different than the way he worked with another person, which I know, Jim, you do that too. And with me, he listened, and then right at that key moment, he would ask the right question that would spark, something in me, or he would mention something that would help me, or he would say, I'll go get you a resource for that. I can help you achieve that by going and, finding this for you, or going and talking to so-and-so. So he supported me when I worked for him in my endeavors in the way that I needed to be supported, which allowed me to perform at my best. Darren, what do you think?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the individualization being right up there, I think would have a secondary influence on people, connectedness as well, and relating, for sure. And of course, my adage has always been, and this goes back to my teaching days, I need to be firm, fair, and consistent with everybody I work with, which I actually learned from a great assistant principal, and applied that into managing people in the corporate world. So, but even though firm, fair, and consistent, I treat people consistently, but differently, right? So I know it can come across as playing favorites. I really strive for that not to be the case. I don't think that people perceive that when I was leading bigger teams, because I did tailor, and it was a strength, right? It came natural to tailor my style to each individual.
And you were always like the subject matter expert that we could go to as well.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? The intellection side, I guess, and learner and input. Happy to provide details to anyone who wants to know.
And I also noticed that you would have different one-on-one meetings with people. So some people wanted to meet every week. Some people wanted to meet 30 minutes. Some people wanted to meet every other week for an hour. Like, you catered to their style.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I guess that wasn't, I'm trying to think if that was really by design, because I consistently have one-on-ones. That was non-negotiable, but it's true. I did our one-on-ones differently with everyone on my team.
Mm-hmm. Jim, does that help?
Well, I think so. And so, Darren, it sounds like you have used strength finders in your groups that you led, right? So
Yeah,
everyone on your team took the strength finder,
we all took it. Yeah, and we used it.
and tell me how you most used it. What were you looking for, and how did it affect your behavior?
So it gave me proper context for everyone. For sure, my direct reports on what made them tick. And so I do think that I would change the style, and that's a good point, Brandy. I haven't thought about it too much on the way I would even talk through our performance reviews and give feedback the way I would give feedback to each individual. We would go to their strengths. And of course, that was Brandy, you were working on your skills for dashboarding and putting together a lot of the strengths for our teams, right? So I would go to that. We put something on a SharePoint. It was like the early stages in its infancy of
Yes.
Brandy's work. Yeah. So we would go to it. We would go to it quite a bit, and sometimes if I was having challenges, I would go back to the well of our data that we had on their strengths, and at least give me some information on how I could deal with that.
What did you get from that, Darren? Did you get like what motivated them, how their mind ticked and worked, how it was processing things, how they were perceiving things, how they were spitting things back out? Like, where do you feel like your brain was really like what it was trying to see when it would look at those strengths and those patterns?
Yeah, it was probably looking more for framework. The context sitting at the top, it would always go back into what's going on in the whole story of this person. So, and I guess that would go into the individualization. So in that regard, I would think about it quite a bit, but more of a framework. I don't know how much time I would deliberately thought about the strengths, but for sure I would go back to it at times and help it guide me. Yeah.
Makes sense.
What about for assigning tasks on your team?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we actually did look.
We made a switch.
Where and yeah, we did.
Remember, Sheila and I switched. Yeah.
And we did look at, because we did a lot of projects on that particular team with Brandy. We did a lot of projects, so we would try to see who fit well on the execution side, and the folks who are a little more strategic, we would think about where to put them in the process or what types of tasks we would give them. Now that you mention it, yeah.
Do you remember how the heck did you partner me and Gaston? Like, how did you know that he and I should be partnered together?
So you and Gaston, you moved over to our team from another kind of biz ops team.
Yeah, I was on Jaime's dashboarding team.
Yeah.
Sheila was on your team.
So it was a small team, and it was just an obvious match to me for the two of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was highly successful, right? So I mean, even though it was fun to watch you as an odd couple work together, and very professional. You guys got along great, but there was that kind of creative conflict.
Yeah.
was always fun and very successful. Yeah.
We always wanted the same thing, though. I think that's what got us through that. Gaston was highly analytical, and I needed his data mind. So I would just throw stuff at him and he would go fix it all, which I'm sure annoyed him, but he was so good at just creating all the numbers and data and everything we needed. We needed that solid behind the scenes, and he was so good at it. Where I brought more of a product edge to what we were doing, but he was highly competitive and I was a strong achiever. And so we really, really got along very well. And we were both relators as well. So we always took time to talk one-on-one and chat about things beyond the work. So we just had such a strong partnership, and we created a hell of a program in a year. It was really, really fun.
So,
Yeah.
some
Hey, Brandy,
Brandy.
I think
Oh, go ahead.
somebody had a question in the chat.
Sure. What was
Oh.
the question, Jeanie?
It was about zone matrix, I believe.
Oh
What
yeah.
do their zone matrices look
Yes.
like?
Let's take a look. Thank you, Brad. So let's go here. Strength zones. So here is
Isn't this where this falls into play? If I'm in sync with the
yes. Yes, this is a great point, Brad, that when you can look at a zone matrix, you can kind of see where they're going to be strongest, which is why Jeanie and I have had a lot of conversations around her ability to do more than program management, right? To get in there deep and solve problems and make sure that the quality assurance stuff is really high. And this is why we've, discussed maybe cybersecurity would be a good area to take the skill set, the program management skill set too. And not only was it just based on the zone matrix, but it's based on the economy as well, right? If cyber is a huge area and Jeanie has the ability to get into it, why not? So I think we're considering two things on that, where Darren has a double on the innovation side, which is it makes him a little bit more creative, not like the eccentric out of the box, like creating a new piece of art, but rather taking, it's so funny that I'm saying this. Now that I'm saying this, I'm thinking of the art you just created, Darren, which is, Darren's done some book reviews on LinkedIn, and he has been playing with the Chat GPT art, the art version of it, and he's been taking different concepts and saying, telling Chat GPT to create a piece of art based on the inputs that he's giving it to create really beautiful images to pair up with his book reviews, which I would think is kind of tapping here into this zone 4 area.
There goes my career.
Well, prompting, right? It's exciting. That's a different topic, but
Right. Oh yeah.
people who are great and pretty good on the liberal arts side, if they have enough of the right technical savvy, or I think are getting ready to thrive in this new world.
That's a good point. And when you look at just the top 5 here, you see that Jeanie is more execution driven, delivery oriented, where Darren is, although he's got some of this in his top 10, he really is going to be at his best, where he can learn things, he can research, he can be the subject matter experts, and then he can just provide that back out to get the teams, working at their best. I think Jeannie's going to need a little bit more action to be satisfied. Brad, did you have a specific question about this, or are we just bringing it up to make a point?
Well, I was thinking, if as you taught us through the course of time, that this is where we would look for how these patterns fit in with the tools. Probably the bigger question is, and maybe it's in their top 10, how do they fill in their gaps?
Yeah, because if that's exactly what I was thinking, because if we go up here, we can see that the team has gaps, right? They don't come off in at least the top 5 capacity as really strong direction setters. It's like maybe they would partner well with a strong direction setter. Maybe they have to tap into other teams to do their creative marketing, eccentric product creation, because, maybe they work better with things that already exist. Although they are both, I know them both, they're both organized, they might not enjoy it, right? So maybe they could bring someone on their team that would love to do administrative things and would love to just organize. And, maybe that's just not an area they're overly interested in doing. So bringing someone in to fill that gap would be, work really well for them.
So think of where, if we can go back down to the bottom where Darren's is, since he's in transition.
Yeah.
Since he's in transition, what type of work would fit him best?
Yeah. So let me show you his top 10 to answer this.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. First of all, Darren, I'll let you answer that. Do you have an idea of what you think where you are absolutely at your best?
Oh, I'm at my best leading people, and leading people who lead people, right? So putting teams together, going back to what you were talking about, Brandy, of letting people run, and not be out of control, but run, but run and be productive as a team. So it kind of goes back. In fact, we had those.
You reined me
I
in once.
remember just once.
Once. I remember it very clearly. I was like, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But it's kind of the Moneyball concept, right? So we did talk a lot at the time about getting the right people in the right spots and not having, you only have so many 5-tool players. So I can cobble together an incredible team or even an incredible individual coupled with some other, maybe you and Gaston, like we talked about before, to be highly successful. And I guess that goes with individualization of recognizing as a kind of a coach, where to put people together. Now, as far as me, my personal gaps, I guess leaning on others who would help in those areas as well. But as far as where I would thrive in transition, it's leading team. I could be an individual contributor for sure and do well, but my wheelhouse is leading people.
Now, do you have a preference of whether you're leading people in an education sense, in a technical sense? What kind of, when you talk about your subject matter expertise, where is it most fun for you to actually lead teams of people?
Yeah, and that's interesting. I don't know that it needs to be in whether it's education or the area. It's just leading people. Going back to teaching, a great way to prepare people to manage people or teach high school kids for any period of time, right? So you deal with lots of individuals, you deal with angry parents, lots of complicated things where the human condition is most raw, and then kind of bring that and refine it into leading teams in an individualized way. So yeah.
So just to finish that thought out, does that suggest upper mid-level management is where you fit best?
Darren's a director for sure. Right, Darren?
There we go.
Yeah. Director was my last.
Okay.
Role.
That helps.
Yeah. Okay, let me go back to Jeannie's really quick, because Jeanie, I have a question for you. I want to know two things. One, I would love to hear a little bit about how your significance influences these things that we've been talking about today, because it is different than Darren, and it is only 6% of the population that has significance in their top 5 strengths. And I know you have it at your 6th, but that's the stat I have. The second thing that I would like to hear from both of you, if you don't mind, we on the outside here don't have context. I don't know that anybody else on the call has context. Okay. So I think we would all love to know how to work really well with you. How do I, by the way, you guys, if you guys look at my own dashboard here, strength rank context is super low for me. I always skip the context, just like I remembered at the very beginning of this call, I didn't even introduce the call. I just jumped in with my achiever like I always do. So I would love to know how we could work really well with you. If you were to give us feedback of how to work well with you, that would be amazing. So Jeannie, can you help us understand significance a little bit and how that plays in?
Sure. I mean, I think, I mean, one of my attributes, which I don't know if they ever show up in any of these top 10, is I don't have a lot of patience. Don't suffer fools very much. I have a very, I mean, I will listen. I listen to people. I completely, but at some point I'll be like, okay, we need to close this conversation down, this brainstorming down, and move on to do something. And that may be my penchant for action or my bent for action.
Yeah, that execution.
My significance, yeah, that execution focus. So significance really is priorities. And that's why, my program management and my PMO management has been so significant, because I'm always saying, what are our priorities? What do we need to focus on? If I do this, what can I not do? who, how does the business win? I mean, what's in it for them? I mean, that's where I really focus myself, and that's where I want to see the organization moving. So I'm always the person. People get, and that's why I think in a very highly technical organization, I tend to bring some attributes that help the organization, right? They help them, focus on which initiatives are crucial. I try to, push those initiatives. I try to make, what's the most impactful, not just for me, but for the organization. And so I try to make sure that really plays a huge part in how I operate, because I want to make sure that not just me, I mean, obviously, personally, I want to be on successful things. Obviously, that's important to me. But also to be to be successful in a successful team, right? And there have been many organization that I have transitioned out of where I felt like, and I think I mentioned this in when I introduced myself, is I left the calculated division because I felt that there was going to be no investment there. I knew that this was not a priority for the company. It didn't mean that I wasn't going to have a job. It didn't mean that I wasn't, that there wasn't anything for me to do. It just was, I just lost interest because I was like, well, this is not important to this company. This is not an important thing for them. And that group continues to thrive. They're not growing, but they thrive. They are there, and they continue to be there and executing on the things that are being asked of them. But I want to be part of something that's much more important, that's contributing to the business's success, whether it be, the bottom line. That's why cybersecurity was so interesting to me. It wasn't on my radar until 10 years ago, because I looked at it and I said, this is going to make or break a company. It can break you.
Yeah. And
is it just,
go ahead.
I didn't know if it was, you were through with that subject. I was just going to say, is it only in business for significance, or is there like a social significant issue that you passion for?
I do have passion for a lot of issues I contribute, but I'm not necessarily very vocal in large groups. I'm not and I think the other pieces of my, the individualization and pieces, those kinds of pieces come into play. I'm very strong one-on-one. I don't like, you probably noticed I was pretty quiet even in this group. I'm not very vocal, when I'm in a large group, but when I'm with people one-on-one is when I thrive. I do very well. I'm not, and maybe I'm introverted. I don't, I like building relationships, but I like building them one by one. You know what I'm saying? So that may be a part of it as well. I don't know if I answered that question, but.
So here's this really interesting combinations, context and significance. Can you tell us how we could work best with you?
So for me, right, it is about, I think my significance is trust me, ask me questions, but don't, don't keep I don't like micromanagement. I've not done well in my career where, I've been micromanaged. I also enjoy working in teams where people are allowed to just, work on their stuff. I was a manager for over 10 years. I managed 10 to 15 people. And I always tried to make sure that my individualization kind of came into play at that time, because it was all about, what they were good at, what they could bring to the team. I even had this sheet of paper a questionnaire that I used to, use when I first joined a team, or if somebody joined my team, to say, how do you like to work? How often do you like to meet? Where can I help you? How would you like for me to offer my help? I still have that questionnaire somewhere.
That's great.
But, I had that questionnaire, and I would always use that when I first joined a team. I would do that with everybody, and I would say, how frequently do you like to meet? What do you like in a manager? What do you not like in a manager? Those are the kinds of things I would ask. And so for me, right, it was also around the individualization, but also the significance and the context just kind of rolled into together. I don't have anything particular about significance, but I would say it's just a kind of a consolidation of those three strengths together.
Makes sense.
Brandy, I have something really quick I wanted to throw out there. I have a friend who, I have a friend who trains CEOs. He's been a very successful CEO for a long time. And one of the things he does in his management protocol, if you will, is he writes out what he calls his owner's manual, and he asks all his managers to do that too.
I've seen
always,
that.
and it's so helpful for people to have context. As soon as they walk in, they can go look and say, okay, here's the way if you want to get my attention, here's how to do it. That kind of thing.
Yeah,
anyway.
I actually think that would be great for the EIT group. I'm going to bring that up. Good idea.
You never know.
I said your word, right?
Yeah, my word for sure.
So Darren, what about you? How I see this is, I'm asking this question a bit strategically, you guys on the call, because the individualization people have a really hard time with this question because they work with you. So we never know how to work with them well because they're just going to adapt and adjust to you. But I'm curious, how if they can even wrap their mind around the answer of, when has it been really great to work with other people? When do they do what that makes it nice for you to work with them? So Darren, your turn with the tough question.
Yeah, it is hard. It kind of comes back to the individualization. I mean, the one-on-one situation that Jeanie was talking about. So really work well with spending time with people.
Yeah.
So I learn about, it always goes back to history, but it's more than that, right? Just learn about the story and what makes them tick. And that is, then it ends up being a very productive relationship, I think, and work well when people recognize that and give me time to get to know them.
And I think, like, working with you asked great questions, and that opened up the interaction so that I knew that you wanted to hear about me and about my preferences. And, because some of us, that's uncomfortable, right? To present all of that unless we know someone wants to hear about it. But the way that you did it was to open that up, and you never made it like people had to tell you, but you certainly opened it up. And I'm assuming that most people on your teams would share lots of information with you.
Right. I mean, it goes back to that level of trust, right? Yeah. So you build up trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, trust is everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any other closing questions for either one of our speakers today, Darren or Jeanie?
I have one.
Oh, go ahead.
So for Jeanie, I was going to ask about if there was any influence by Indra Nooyi that had to do at PepsiCo with her leadership.
Well, I joined PepsiCo after she left, but there was a lot of there were a lot of remnants of her influence within the organization, particularly in areas, business areas, specifically around some of the light snacks and the healthy snacks, because she was the one who really pushed for having more healthy snacks for low sodium or sodium free, or as well as, some of the beverages, right? The coming up with certain things that were healthier, right, from a soda perspective. So, or beverages, the acquisition of Gatorade was a big thing under her, but unfortunately I didn't have an opportunity to work with her. She had already retired by the time I joined PepsiCo. So
I guess it was a significant influence. I was yeah, it was good. You guys, it's been, luckily I'm even on. I got on this thing a little bit late because I had this little power blow up thing. And so when I got restored back, y'all already started a few things. So I have no air conditioning, and I'm watching you're doing this thing because I'm dedicated to Brandy's strengthology, you guys. So I'm really
that's dedication.
So sorry.
That is dedication. That is absolute dedication. Oh gosh. Thank you for joining, David.
David, I probably jinxed you because we were talking about that before you got on, about how we were just praying that the energy grid holds up here in Texas while we have this heat stroke. So I'm so sorry.
Well, it's been a delight to hear both of these guys, and I've had a little bit of recent intersection with Saber lately, and I think Darren has been on some of the they had a layoff there recently. So
yeah. Jay, did you have a question as well?
Yeah, but I know we're rounding out time. I wonder how much intuition played into y'all's ability to manage people, because it seems like you would collect data points. Like when Brandy, you said Darren connected you with exactly the right person. I'm just wondering how much intuition played in not only in your people management, but your career, right? It seems like, you're moving around at the right time, or you're, doing things. What would both of you say in terms of what the role intuition had in terms of your careers and decision making?
So that's an interesting point. So probably quite a bit. It just triggered the is it tipping point? Malcolm Gladwell's where it seems like intuition, but the museum curator who's able to recognize the fake art is because they've collected so much information that there's just something that sixth sense there that they're able to tell. So that's a good point. Probably a lot of intuition happens because of the other strengths. It's an interesting thought.
I think I mean, I don't know if it's intuition, but I think a lot of mine comes from just observation. I watch people a lot. I love to watch people. I watch their body language. I watch they speak. I watch them speak, and I also watch them, talking between the lines. So, that intuition just develops out of getting to know that those secret or unsaid unspoken words, if you will, as people are speaking, or just their style, the way they kind of operate in the environment. So it's interesting. We have a new gentleman who joined our group a month ago, and it's interesting to watch him in an environment like PepsiCo. He comes from Amazon, and how he's, how he is trying to adapt, but at the same time, you see all those kind of tendencies, that he's developed, right? What has made him successful there, and how he's operating here, and some things he's bringing to the table, which is wonderful. But there are some things that are not, that probably won't work. It's just the culture of the company is so different. It's an older company, and people operate in a different way, and you have to have patience, and it's good to be impatient and push the button, but you're in danger of destroying relationships or damaging your relationship at some point. So you have to. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Is what I call it. So.
Yeah, it seems like subtext. It's almost like the context and data points are taken so that the subtext is seen and evaluated before decisions are made, which was, I was thinking that's intuition, but you guys are good about seeing the subtext of what actually people are saying and doing and reading between the lines.
Right.
Yeah, actually that book is Blink. I just looked it up.
Yeah, Blink.
Oh,
yeah. Great book, by the way.
It is a great book. Great author.
Jeanie and Darren, thank you so much for being here today. We have really, really enjoyed your insights, and thank you for just opening up and sharing with us, how you guys go about leading teams and how you've led, your careers up to this point. It's been really, really insightful, and we just really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed being here. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.